Good morning, everybody. We are continuing on with our studies of the Yomi Eruvin. We are on Vav Amud Aleph, right at the very top. So we are still talking about the fixing of mavois, and today we are talking about starting talking about lechi. So itmar lechia omed me'alav Abaye Omer have lechi Rava Amar lo have lechi. So if you have a lechi that's freestanding, so Abaye says that's considered to be a lechi, and Rava says it's not considered to be a lechi. So we say freestanding. What does that mean? So that could meaning that it's not. It could either be that it's. We'll get to more of the Gemara. So the question is when it says is it freestanding? Is it that it's not? Is that it was there before, or is it that simply it's just not connected to the law? So here we're going to question now first a lot of questioning. So so now if we have a case where, let's say, there happens to have been, there was somebody they nailed a post to the wall for some other reason, or let's say if they had placed the or let's say there's just happened to be something else that could serve as lechi in the right place. So would that work? So everybody seems to agree that if nobody knew that it was there before Shabbos and didn't think this is the lechi for the mavoi, then it's no good. Keep ligi head. The question comes down to, if you saw it when you're walking by and you're like, that's my lechi, good. There's a post there that I don't have to bother today. Depending on so Abaye Amar have lechi. All right, so Beit said that's fine, as long as I said that's my lechi, even if I didn't touch it and do anything new, that's fine. Rava Amar lo have lechi. On the other hand, Rava says no, because you have to have made it explicitly with intent for it to be a lechi, and if you didn't, then it's no good. You may have thought that they disagree with regards to a lechi, and they would also disagree about a mechitza. But actually, no, it's not. That's not the case, because a wall is a wall, but a lechi serves a different purpose. As we mentioned, a large part of the purpose of a lechi is for haker, to remind you of something. Therefore, because its purpose is different, you can't simply say that it's there just because there's a to be post. For a wall is a wall is a wall. So Tashma.
So Rabbi, sorry, so that means even Rava would say that if the wall was there before and they didn't realize it was there, then it would be no problem. It could act as a wall in regards to Eruv.
Correct. Correct.
So it's just lechi they're arguing about. Okay.
Correct. Because if there's a wall there, there's a wall there. We're not talking about a case about if a wall, somebody built a wall on Shabbos. We're not talking about that case right now. But in general, there's a wall, you just didn't realize there was a wall there. Because let's just say you just didn't walk that way. So let's say your air fell down on Shabbos. Then it turns out though that actually you think the air was down, but it turns out that before Shabbos somebody put up a fence there, right underneath where your wire was, where the entrance was. Even though the wire fell down for the Tzur Petach, so you still have the wall there, so you're still good. So Tashma. So now we're talking about a case of Omen Me'alav comparing to Sukkah. We do a lot in Eruvin. If we compare the Eruvin case with something similar in Sukkah. So Tashma. Right. So now we're talking about trying to make a sukkah with the trees on one side. Number two. That's diagram number 200. Can you have them can you have a tree being a wall? So, Sherat, it's kosher. So, how does this work? You planted trees in order for them to be the wall of your sukkah. If you planted them for that, then of course it's going to work. So, Mahudatem, I may have thought, the problem, maybe you'll start using the tree itself and start attaching things to it, and then you'll end up maybe breaking off a branch or something to fix your stuff on Yantiv. That it's fine to have a tree as one of the walls, but again, this is referring to when you had planted the tree initially for some purpose. So
Rabbi, is there a question of muksa for the tree, like on Shabbos?
Yes. In general, the trees are treated as if they're muksa because of the Zerashem, because of the case of maybe you'll end up breaking off a branch. So for here, that wouldn't apply because you're not really using you're not sufficiently actively using the tree. It's just kind of standing there, so therefore wouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Looking at it, I mean, the fact that you're able to see it is all that it accomplishes.
Right.
No, but if it's in your sukkah, you still might come in contact with it.
Right, but we're not worried about your coming in contact with it. Then we're worried about whether or not we're not worried about if it's simply being a wall, because you don't use a wall. A wall tends to just simply stay there. So that's not sufficient usage of a tree where we think you might end up breaking something off or anything else. Whereas if you wanted to hang something on the tree, so that's the case, but you very well might break off a branch. But obviously breaking off a branch when you're simply, using it as a wall is very, very low. Therefore, they didn't make it there to bottom for that purpose. Okay. So now we're gonna have another case involving trees. So Dashma. Hayasham Ilan o Gader o Chitzat Kanim Nidon Mishum Diuma. So if you have a tree, a fence, or a barrier made up of reeds that are kind of like that are weaved to be a hedge, so that's diagram number 201 is more of the interwoven hedge. Also we see it here in diagram number 203 as well, right? So we see that there's a so the bet is the reeds, okay? Right, so that's like a reed fence, okay? That's self-standing. Kader is simply any fence, so that's bet. That's just there's that. Yeah, there's Gimel, right? That's the normal wall, and then we've got and Elon is the tree in the corner there. So in all those cases, it's considered to be a Dumad. When I say Dumad, we mean it's a post that goes in two directions, which means that you can count it towards both walls. Let's say if you're doing, through the pedals on each side, or if you're using it for, or if you're doing it for Pasi Birot, which we addressed a little bit, we'll deal with more later. That let's say the way you allow usage of a well on Shabbos. So those cases, so in all these things, if they're placed in on the corners, they can serve as a fence in both directions, assuming they're of sufficient size. So I was going to ask you, so how does that work, right? So this would imply that it's there. You didn't mean it to be there, but now it's valid as well. We don't say you put up any of these things; they were there already. How come Nami Mayaskina? So I want to say this case too. Just you put these things there. You put them there in order for them to be part of the structure. Yihachi my kamash malan. So if that's the case, so then what do we learn out from here? Kamash malan chitzat kanim kana pelchot v'shlosh tzachim kituba mineh ba'ay merabah. What we learn about from here is the case of when they're all within 3 tvachim of each other, as is what happened with the machloket of Ba'ay and Rabbah when we were having before, similar to what we were talking about the discussion of Lavud. So there's an argument in Ba'ay and Rabbah about if which we'll get to about whether or not they have to be whether Lavud works only horizontally or vertically, like is it do the slats and does it work in both directions, vertically and horizontally? So that's what it's teaching us. That's proof for that one. It's not a proof for here. It's really proof for something else. That both vertical and horizontal level work. Okay. So now we're going to go into the next diagram. Go. So okay. So here. So that diagram is number 204. Okay. Right. So this is a zoomed in photo of the way the reeds are making the corner. They're saying there's a gap in between. Not that it's it's fully interwoven. Like if you ever. Let's say if instead of the bamboo mat to go on the stock, you decided to stick it into the ground on this instead as a wall, right? It would work for that. So I'm not going to recommend it not to though, because it's not the sturdiest of walls. If you try setting up like that, it tends to fall over. But pretending you had a sturdy enough one, then that's basically what they're talking about, more or less. So Tashma. Now we're talking. Now this is another case of another tree and how its walls work. So, Ilan hamesis al haaretz im ein nofo gavoa min ar shlosha tachim u'tatlin tapta. So now we're talking about a case where you have a tree with very large branches that droop towards the ground and carry underneath it. So if the branches reach within 3 tvachim of the ground, you can carry underneath it because it's considered to be its own area. So when do we allow you to do that? Only when you plant the tree for the outset in order to sit underneath it and use the air underneath it. In that case, that's when the branches can then become a wall, but if not, then they'll not be able to become a wall. Here, so that's, you see then diagram number 205. We've got this guy sitting there reading underneath. I think he's reading underneath the tree, and so then there's the gap. Then there's the gap underneath. That way, it makes his nice little reading area, and there's walls surrounding him on all sides. Right, so it's not really see through, because if that was the case, you wouldn't really have the sufficient walls. But we're assuming that it's surrounding him properly.
Sorry, Rabbi, one quick question about intent on this one. I mean, it would take forever for the tree to get that size from the time that you planted it. So are we saying that, 20 years in advance, he plants a tree knowing that eventually it'll grow to that size with branches that hang down, and then when that happens, he can then use it this way?
Yes.
Okay, because, I mean, the intent is pretty separated from the time that it's usable that way.
Correct. Like a lot of time, what happens was with the Malacha of Zareh on Shabbos, right? You're not planting now so that it'll be ready in 10 minutes. You plant it now on Shabbos. If you're planting your seeds now, it'll be ready in a couple months. Or let's say if you're planting a tree, then let's say you plan a carob tree, so then you can have up to 70 years till you get fruit.
Yeah, I remember that story. But
yeah.
does it also work if the person who originally planted it had that intent, and then someone 20 years later buys the property?
Yes.
So the intent was when it was planted, not you, but the intent of the planting.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you read my mind.
Excellent questions.
Good, Joel. We've been learning enough together. That's good.
We're in sync.
Okay. So continuing on. So ihachi letaltel bakulo. So if that's the case, you should be able to carry it no matter how large the area is. So Amar Rav Huna Braid to Rav Yeshua Enotal Limbo Elevates at times. So there's actually a limit of the carrying underneath one of these trees. And the limit there is Beit Satayim, which is the area that you could plant two worth of grain, which is 5,000 cubic amot. So, right. So the question is, why is there a limit? It's because Mishum Dehave Dira Tashmish Shalavir. Chol Dira Tashma Shalavir and Metatlin Ba Elevates that time. This is because this is a not fully enclosed, right? And it's not a fully enclosed area meant for an individual to use, right? So then it's Tashmish Shalavir, right? It's used by, it's used for the open area behind it. Meaning is the purpose isn't really living there. It's people around can then serve to use this area. So it's not like you made you planted a tree. Let's pretend you had a tree that would plant and become a tree house, right? Let's say that you're really good at bioengineering and they managed to pull that off, right? You need to plant a tree, come back in 3 years, you got a house. So that would be a case where it's not official out there. But this is saying it's like you planted it there. People will walk in, you'll sit underneath it and read. So it'd be nice, but then that's not the same. That's not so. But it's simply a tree that has usage for outside. It isn't meant to be like a place where you actually sleep and eat and everything else. Then it ends up being then it has a limit on size of Beit time. It's not a small area, but it is a limit. Okay, so Tashma. So now we're talking about another case about 10 things. So Tashma, Shabbat, Batel. So this means if you decided to rest for Shabbos on top of a hill, and then Shahush Gavoa Asara Hu Arba Amot Rabeit Satayim. And so you're on top of some sort of hill, and it's 10 amot tall, and it is at least and its surface area is at least, meaning it's like either 4 by 4 or Beit Chaim. Similarly, if we happen to have a cavity or some hole in the ground, it would be the same case. And then let's say there's indentation, which isn't necessarily a set. So also, if you had I'm sorry, this is if let's say you're in a wheat field, or North America, you're more likely to be standing in a giant cornfield, right? Let's say you're standing in a corn maze. So if the stalks surrounding you are of sufficient area enclosed and are sufficiently tall, then you can walk the whole area and get an additional 2,000 amot around it, meaning this is considered to be a valid structure for living, to the extent that by you're resting there, you get 2,000 amot to walk through, and you get you get the area that's enclosed, which we were assuming from the previous one, but also you get but it's considered to be a residence enough that you get the 2,000 amot surrounded, which would mean that you're basically, even though you didn't intend to, nobody made this mountain for this purpose, nobody dug this hole for this purpose, nobody planted these stalks of grain for this purpose. Yet, at the end of the day, you're able to use it as a structural Shabbos, and it's considered to be your house. So therefore, it would say that you don't need kavanah anymore, right? That you don't need kavanah when you first planted it, as long as it's sufficiently structured, it's good enough.
Rabbi, are we talking? Excuse me. Sorry, are we talking about tchum here?
About what?
Are we getting into the idea of tchum, or no?
We're not really. We're just saying it was mentioned in passing here. So just look at the diagram. So we've got the guy on the top of the hill, guy inside the indentation in the ground. We got the guy surrounded by the wheat field. So we're saying that when it says you get 2,000 amot around it, it means that this area is sufficient. It means that this area is being used as your home. And it's not just that, this is a undisclosed location you can carry within it. It's saying, no, this is an actual area that if you happen to be sleeping there, then it becomes as if it's your home. So that implies that it's more.
Even though it's outside. Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's say if you want to say that you made this intentionally for this purpose. So, like I said, we were talking about before, you're planning everything. So bishlama kama lachaye. So I understand how you'd have done it in the standing grain. I'll tell Vaneka, Mike Lemmer, but how could you have done that for a small hill and for a hole in the ground? So Ella. So how would it work? We all agree that in all these cases that if there are walls, it doesn't matter. So therefore, it should be fine. Right? So you're right. So that previous case, that wasn't talking about uses of it for right. So that's a conclusive proof that for walls you don't need any kavanah. Right? But then we don't want to know about walls. We want to know about lechis. So Abaya the Tame. So everything. Now we're going back to the discussion between Abaya and Rava about which things need lechi or mechitza do they require? If they're done by themselves, do they work or not? So Abaya the Tame. So every reason mechitza works. So now we're back to lechi argument. So Abaya says lechi b'shem mechitza. Lechi works because it's like a wall. Mechitza suya me'aleha havi mechitza. Basically, Abaya says a lechi is a wall, works like a wall does. So therefore, since lechi works as a part of the wall that you will then extend across, therefore that's sufficient. Rav on the other hand says, the Amar lechi mishum heker. He says no. The purpose of lechi is to remind you. And so Rav is saying no. You have to put it there yourself, because if it's simply a natural feature that you didn't put there, that's nowhere near good enough indication. So. Right, so that's how they argue. That's what they say. Now we're gonna try to figure out which way is the halacha at the end of the day. Tashma. Avnei gader hayotzot min hageder udalot zamizu pachot mishlosha and tzarich lachi acher. Shlosha tzarich lachi acher. So So if you have a wall that has, that has some rough stones sticking out of it, in each one are different from each other less than 3, you don't need another lechi. That's sufficient. That's enough to be your lechi, right? So that's diagram number 210, right? So let's say there used to be a wall there, or just they did bad shoddy construction, and therefore it's not flush. So assuming that it's sufficiently recognizable, that it's sticking out, and that the gap between them isn't more than 3 tvachim, so we can load all the bricks together. That's sufficient. So, but if it's more than 3, then they're lechi because Lovett isn't working yet. So Hakanami Shibanan Miskilakach. So you could say that they built it for these purposes. That's why they stuck it out like this, so it could be used as a lechi. If that's the case, of course it would work because you built a lechi. What do you have to say? Maybe you thought that he built it, and so that way he could later build another structure, right? Because basically, as you can see in the diagram, right, it looks like, right, like you could fit more bricks still. So if he built one wall for now, it's like I want to get an extension later, and I don't want to have to take down this whole wall and put a new one up. I want it to be structurally sound, and if you don't crisscross the bricks, it's gonna be bad. So that's why he built it that way. So, that even if it looks like you built it for sake of extension, because you built it with both intents in mind, or as long as you built it at least with intent of, this is supposed to be lucky, that's good enough. Even if people look at it and are like, he's in the middle of construction, he didn't do it on purpose. But as long as the person who did it had intent, that's sufficient. Okay, so that means we haven't really proved anything yet. So let's keep trying to figure out whether or not you need intent for lucky or not. Tashma, the timer bechia kotel shetzido achad kanus b'chavero ben shenir b'achut shav b'fnim ben shenir b'fnim shav b'achut tzidon mishum lucky. So we have a case. So now we have a case where we have walls of differing lengths. My diagram here. So that's diagrams back. Okay, the diagram is back on number 1 here. Let's scroll back up there then. Okay, so moment, I'll get to the right diagram. Here we go. So this is the case. This is in the corner here, 110. Right. So where you have where the wall narrows, and we're saying that's sufficient to be a lechi. It doesn't matter which one's out, which one's in, as long as there's an indication there that there's a recognizable gap. That's enough for your lechi. So hakanami. So should that work? No. Hakanami should something still got. Rather, why did you make that uneven structure on the edge over there? Also, you did that on purpose in order to allow for the purposes that we're talking about now. Not that. So and therefore, we still haven't resolved our argument. Okay. So let's get back to here. Okay. Why do you do it? What's it going to say? Rather, it was teaching us that this is showing you that even from inside or from outside, one of them doesn't notice that it's a lechi. As long as one party, inside or outside, sees it, that's enough for it to be a lechi. Okay, so let's try again. Tashma. The Rav Haviyativ Bahu Mavoat. The Rav was once sitting in an alleyway. Haviyativ Ravuna Kamei, and Ravuna was sitting in front of him as well. Amar L'Shamei. So, and then he said to his attendant, Zil Aiti Li Kuza Demai. He said, go bring a pitcher of water. Ada Ata Nafalakia. Then before he came, then the lechi that was by the mavoi fell down, which means that he wouldn't be able to bring the water into the lechi for them to drink. Akvile Abide Kam Aduchte. So therefore, Rav said stop, and then like you said, he waved off the attendant, and then that was that. So Amar le Ravuna, lo savar mar l'smoch adikla. So then Ravuna asked Rav, what about relying on the tree by the entrance, right? The palm tree by the entrance. So Amar Demai Hai Rabbanan command law parshi in Shishma. So he says. So he leads off with he starts with an insult. So who is this? What is this scholar? This person from amongst the Rabbanan, as if he has not actually learned anything, has not heard anything from the rabbis, because you clearly never heard of the concept of Semchalav Metmal, Right? Clearly, you didn't hear that somebody has to have intent, have had in mind to put it as a malachi from the day before. Right? So what do we infer from the story? We learn here that the reason why that tree is no good is because you didn't have intent. So not because you didn't build it, but because you didn't remember to say this is my tree. But if he had said this is my lechi, he didn't have to replant the tree. Just he said that's my lechi, that was sufficient. So now we found that our answer is do you have to have planted from the beginning or not? So according to Rav, it seems pretty clear that as long as you had in mind at any point, that's sufficient, not that you've had to have planted anything in the middle. So Lema Abaye Rava B'Delos Abchinan Alaya. So let's say that Abaye Rava's opinion isn't about did you plant it if you planted it for that intent, rather it's a question of did you remember to say this is my lechi before Shabbos? But as in if it had, but if you'd said this is my lechi, then the tree would be fine. Let's look about this. No, that's not right. Because you wouldn't necessarily have thought that. Dahu barka dahava bebar chavu dahavu pligi by Rava kulishnayu. Right. This is not the case because there was a certain balcony that was in the house of our abo. That Abaye and Rava disagree about their entire lives, meaning that they were arguing about whether or not this, let's show the guy's very nice porch. So he has his porch by the right. So there's the mavoy, and then there's somebody's got a nice house with an extension going out, and then the question is whether or not you can count this pole as a lechi for the mavoy or not, and they always argued till the end of their lives. So therefore, that means actually no, they never agreed. They still disagree. If you had it, so that means the argument is whether or not you said this is my lechi, does it work or not? Because if they're still arguing, then they're still arguing about that. And that's the conclusion, is that Rava and Abaye argue about that. Okay. Now we're at the Mishnah on the bottom of Tevav and Aleph, going on to Tevav and Bet. So, you can make a lechi out of anything, even if it's alive. Rabbi Meir also make out of things that are living, because maybe it'll move. So, Matamim Shum Golo. And another machloket is about using a living creature as part of structure. So Tanakama states that you could use a living being to cover up a burial pit, and then it will become tameh because of tumat golel, i.e., because it's a grave cover. Rabbi Meir said no, that you can't become tameh. That wouldn't work. So you can't. The animal would not become tameh. And similarly, Tanakama says you can write a get on top of an animal, like in its side while it's alive, or in its horn. Rabbi Yossi Haguli Pasal. But Rabbi Yossi says you can't do anything to a living animal. No using it as a wall, no using it as a cover, no using it as a get. So Gemara. So Tanya. So every bride to support the Rebbe's opinion in the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir Omer Kol Davar Sheish B'Ruach Chaim Eno Tzinato Lo Dofen Lo Sokav Olech Lemavoy Lo Pazli Garav Lo Golo Lo Kever. So this is stating that Rabbi Meir says no using living things as walls, or as roofs or covers. As he says, anything that's alive can't be used for a wall for a sukkah, can't be used as a lechi for an alleyway, and it can't be used as boards to surround a well, nor can it be used as a cover for a grave. Similarly, Rabbi Yossi Hagili says you also can't use it to write again. So why does so now we have to figure out what is the opinions behind Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi Hagili. So my time Rabbi Yossi Hagili, Tanya Sefer, Ainli Ela Sefer. So Rabbi Yossi Hagili says that it has to be a sefer, it has to be in a scroll of some sort, and a living being is not a sefer. So minayin l'ravokal davar. And then how would you say that anything can be written on anything? So the chatavla, so you mean that you can write it on whatever thing you want to write it on. That's sufficient. So imkain matumud lamar sefer. What is the what does the sefer say? So for the Tanakh, you believe that's the Midrash that stops right there. Everything's included at the end. But for Rabbi Yossi, Aglili, imkain matumud lamar sefer. What's the sefer teaching us? Lamar lach. So therefore, it teaches at the end what can you use? So it can't be alive and it can't be food, because alive or food, then that's not considered to be a sefer.
Rabbi, what are we talking about? Using a live creature for mechitza? We're talking that it's alive, or it was alive. Like
it is currently alive. You decided to tie your goat to the so it won't be able to move with a very short leash, or like you strapped to the wall and there's like left it there. You don't have any wood available, but you have your goat, and right before Shabbos you decided, let's just tie my goat to the wall and we'll call it a day.
And what about the writing on it? Like you're writing on a
yes, writing on a live animal, because I want to divorce my wife now. She burnt my soup. So I'm going to take, and I was herding my sheep or my goats, and all I have is my goat. So I'm going to write it on the side of my goat, hand it to my wife, and then I'm going to walk, and that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Is it advisable? Would it be advisable? No, but like if you wanted to be very disrespectful in the way that you were giving your get, that would be a pretty good way. Not that anybody.
It's not good for a marriage proposal, but maybe it's good for a get.
Correct. I don't know, if your dowry is a very fine sheep, maybe she'll like it. But yeah, I would recommend it.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to pull the wool over her eyes, though.
Yeah. So so we discussed Rabbi Yossi Guli why he says that you can the white can't be alive or food. What does the Rabbanan do with the word b'sefer? So rather Rabbanan say, it doesn't say b'sefer, it says sefer ktiv. It means that it simply has to be something that you can use to take account of things on, which would mean that as long as you have the language of the get written on whatever it is, that's all that matters. Rabbanan hai b'chatavla my darshi bay. The Rabbanan, what do they say? What do they learn from b'chatavla? Humabai b'ktiva mitgareshet and mitgareshet b'kesef. Rather that you can be. What does it teach us? B'chatavla. It means that in order to divorce your wife, you have to have written something out. You can't simply divorce her by giving her money. No. Just like you can be Kaddish a woman and have her marry you by giving her money. Similarly, you can divorce her by giving her money. So that doesn't work. Also, this drasha, right? So the question of why you're allowed to be Kaddish a woman with a shtar is learned out from the fact that you divorce her with a shtar. Right? So they were trying to see if you can reverse the other way to learn that the things that you can only Kaddish woman with, you can divorce her with. And here it's saying, no, you can't do that. Okay. So now we're back to Rabbi Glili. So Rabbi Glili, hi Svar Manale. So then Rabbi Glili, where does he learn out that you can't divorce a woman with money? Now, it says Chatavla Sefer Kritut. Right, so the next word. So it's a sefer kritut. It means that a sefer is something that can be divorced her, but not money or anything else. It has to be something written, and that's where he gets the button for what is written on. That's what his previous verse addresses. Rabbanan hai sefer kritut mibayle l'davar hakoret beno levena, and the Rabbanan use the word sefer kritut to teach us that has to be something in writing that will differentiate you from her. Look at the time. It's just stated that right. So for instance, you're trying to tell divorce from a certain conditions is not considered to be a valid get because that's not truly cutting it off. So for instance, like you cannot tell a woman to never drink wine ever again or never to go to her father's house, and for that to be a valid divorce. So therefore, that doesn't work. Okay, but for all the first, if you say let's say for 30 days, that would work because it's completely unreasonable to expect as a condition of divorce to say never go to your father's house and never drink wine. But if you say if you really are serious about getting divorced, don't go home for a month and don't drink wine for a month, that's a reasonable expectation. That's considered to be sufficient amount of differentiation between her and her husband and being karet to cut up to sever between the two of them. So that would be fine. Rabbi Yossi Aglili not mikaret kritut. So and Rabbi Yossi Aglili is that because it is in from the karet part of kritut, right? So right because the word right the fact that meaning because you could have written something saying sefer karet just for cutting says kritut means that it has to be not only that we had before for the sefer kritut drasha that it has to be something that is written. It's also saying that it is something that's different between. It's not just the exclusion of money, but it's the exclusion of money, and it has to be a proper document of ending the marriage without any weird conditions. For Rabbanan, karet kritut l'darshi, and the Rabbanan say it's not sufficiently different of a word for us to need for there to be another drasha. That's where they stop. Okay. Next Mishnah. Here we go. So we're going to address the Mishnah as far as how we'll go. Yeah, we'll see how far we get down on the page. Probably start with the Sheshma on the bottom. Okay, so Sharash Shachantu Bika Vekifu Klei Behema Matal Tzalim B'Doka. So now we're talking about animals. Well, here are the animals. So well, more the Kalim, but if a caravan was camped in a valley and they decided to take off the pack of animals and surround themselves, then you can carry inside. V'vach shehei gader gavoa sar tzachim lo yipratzot yitzerat al binyan. And that works as long as the wall, the piles of stuff, are 10 tachim tall, and the gap, and there's not more gaps than there are walls. So pirtza shehi keser amot muteret mipnei shu petach yeter mikan asor. And as far as the size of the gaps that are allowed, they can't be more than 10. Because as long as they're less than 10, that means that it's an entrance. But if it's more than that, then it's usher. Okay, itmar. So stated earlier, which you've already mentioned about the question of parts, right? So now we're trying to figure out the case of parts ke'ome. Itmar, parts ke'ome. It's exactly equal. What's the story? Rav Papa Amar Mutar. Rav Papa says that it's fine if they're exactly equal, amount standing versus the amount that's empty. Rav Huna Breda Rav Yeshua Amar Asur. Rav Huna Breda Rav Yeshua says no, if they're exactly the same amount of open versus standing, that's a problem. That's it. Rav Papa Amar Mutar. Why did Rav Papa say that it's allowed? Halcha Agmerach Manal Moshe. Lo tifrotz ruba. This is Halcha Moshe Sinai. Don't break more than half. Rav Huna Breder Shua Amar Halka Breder Manal Moshe Kedor Ruba. So that's kind of like the glass half full, glass half empty. So what's the statement? Don't have that Hashem told Moshe. Was it don't have it be majority open, or is it cover most of it? Right, like fence at most. So depending on which way you go, is whether when you get to 50%, will be good or no good. Done. Go to the Mishnah. Lo yipratzot yiterot al binyan. So also says in the Mishnah, you can't have more gaps than there is a structure. Ha kabinyan mutar. So that means if there's more, so it's that Mishnah said if it's more gaps, then it's a problem. But if it's exactly kabinyan mutar, that means that if it's exactly the same that it's mutar. No, we don't mean that. Rather, they mean to say that if the structure is more than the gaps, then it's mutar. Don't say that that's exactly equal. That's not the Mishnah talking about at all. So then, but if it's equal, the gap and the built-up space, is it asur? That was the case. It should have said. Then what? Then it should have said. They should. The language would have been, don't make the gaps equal to the structure. Kasha, you're right. So we can't prove anything from the Mishnah, from the language of the Mishnah. So we keep going. Tashma. But don't we have a case that if you're building a sukkah with skewers or with bedposts, and if the gap between them is equal, kumotan, like them, shera, then it's good. So that implies that it's that equal, it's fine. No, what is the case there? Where the skewers are able to be moved and unmoved. So that's why we say that's the case. Something. Wait, but is it possible to even look? So if we say kabiyam, but wait, can we even calculate that? Can we calculate things exactly to that precision to know that they're exactly in half? Rather, so then why is it okay? It's because you're adding on the roofing. So that's why it's not the same. Because when you have the sukkah, there's also the roofing on top, and that changes the calculus of the part that's halal made. Because there's roofing. Okay. So Rav Amar, Rav says, Im hayu netunin erev, no sheti, shti no erev. So Rav said, so make sure that it works. Case where they're exactly equal. So you should make sure to put the you should make sure that when you build it, you should build it perpendicularly to solve the problem, right? So that if the skew, so here, let's see it. Okay, so let's get to the picture here. Okay, yeah. So basically, if it's standing vertically, you should do it horizontally, and vice versa. Okay, so here now let's just so again we'll review through the pictures. Okay, so we started talking about the case of. Okay, so we're going to scroll through quickly. To summarize what we covered, and we'll see the tashma on the bottom here tomorrow. So, so we talked about the case of a freestanding lechi. Do you need to have kavana or not have kavana? We brought proofs based on use of trees for sukkah, or based on use of branches for sukkah, or use of walls. Trying to figure out, do you need to have kavana from the outset or not? Talk about the case of a tree for shade. Talk about the case of again, read in the corners. Talk the case of a tell of if you have a mountain working and its walls. If you have a dugout area, does that work or not? Of a case if you had a planted field in the stalks. Try to figure out about the case. Let's say if we have rocks sticking out of one side, if that works. So in all those cases, we determine them to be inclusive. In all those cases, we're saying, was it done based on the intent originally or not intent originally? And then we finally had a statement of the Beit and Rava, where they argued about the case. They always argued about the case of the person who had the house with the beam sticking down on the bottom to support his extension. That they always argued about that. So therefore, it meant that they always argued everybody agrees if you plant it to be a wall. If you plant it intentionally, then it would be fine. And everybody else agrees that if it's a full wall, it also works. They just kept arguing over the case of this is a freestanding post, not necessarily planted for that purpose. Can you say this is my lechi or not? And that's what they argued about to the days. And then we got to the case, and we started talking about about living animals. Are they considered to be valid things to use to cover things, as well as including that that is machloket whether or not you're allowed to use living things or not based on drashot, Rabbi Yosef, Guli, and Rabbi Meir. And lastly, we start talking about the case of if you were about a caravan and trying to learn from there, the case of the majority being open versus majority being closed, and which way does it work or not work. And the conclusion is that or we haven't really fully concluded yet, but we said that a way to solve the issue is one of the ways for sukkah is that you should always do, if you think if it's exact, if you do perpendicular, then there'll always be a little bit more. So if they were all lined up in a row, then you might wind up with that being exactly happening a problem. But if half of it is covered and the schach is going the other way from the walls, then there'll be always a little bit overhang, and that'll solve a problem. As you can see in the diagram down here on the bottom, that once you're doing that, then that'll give you a little extra overlap will be enough to make it no longer 50. I'll give you a majority good sukkah, and that is that. And if you want to see them all in one big picture where they're like what a camp might look like, that's the picture over here. So we'll hopefully get to we'll eventually get to all of the different pieces of it tomorrow.
Shkoyach.
Okay, so,
Yeah, have a good day.
Shkoyach, thank you.
Have a good day.
yeah, everybody.
So, Rabbi, quick question.
Yeah.
So, are we saying right now where we're holding is that, first of all, there's machlokas whether if it's equal amount of open space and closed space, is it good? And now we're saying that with the eitzah of sukkah, that it should be perpendicular, so it'll be overhang. So now it seems we're saying that, no, equal is not good. It's got to be a little bit extra closure than openness. Is
Right.
that what we're saying?
We're saying we haven't concluded that, but a way that for sure is good is if you do it, if you have them like overlapping a little bit, because you switch directions, then you'll for sure wind up with it being a majority one way. So
Everybody would agree with that, yeah.
right. So this is just a way to avoid the machloka. This is what you should do. But we haven't concluded yet. We still have a whole bunch more proofs left on the next. I'm just going to do more time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, have a good day.
You as well.